In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you my process for building no-code projects as well as adding new features to some of my existing projects. So without further ado, let's get into it. Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I want to share with you my process for building MVPs as well as building new features in existing no-code projects. I typically go through 5 different stages, but that can vary depending on the complexity of a feature. And the main reason why I wanted to share it in this video today is because I think especially people who are just getting into no-code can oftentimes get confused with the order in which you do certain things. So the main reason why it's really important to have an order in which you build certain products is because if you just do it randomly, things will get messy very fast. It will make it really hard for you to actually build your platform. It will make it even harder to maintain it. And as soon as you jump into setting up workflows, things will just not work and it can get very frustrating. So the process that I'm going to be showing you today can be applied to building both an MVP, so starting a website from scratch, as well as adding new features to existing projects that you might be working on. Now, if you are new to this channel and you want to learn more about setting up online businesses with no-code tools, then subscribe to the channel. Also, if you are interested in more content like this, then please like this video. It really helps the channel out a lot. But with that being said, let's dive into the first point. So the very first thing that you're going to need to do before you even look at the different no-code tools is to figure out what is the actual goal of this MVP or the new feature. And I don't mean that in a philosophical sense. I actually mean what is the conversion that is going to happen once that feature is built. So say for example with the Unicorn Factory, when I built my MVP, the main conversion that I was working towards was generating a lead for a freelancer by having a client fill out the contact form on their page. So as soon as you are very clear about what exactly it is that you are trying to achieve, you can now move into the first stage of the product development cycle, which is to mock up your site. So a mock-up is a high-level design of what a page could potentially look like before you start building it in tools like Webflow. Now, if you come from a graphic design background and you know how Figma works, then you can obviously use Figma in order to do it. But I personally actually just grab a piece of paper and draw it out. Now, throughout this process of mocking up your site, you want to go and look into what you want the layout to be, but probably more importantly, in the first starting point is you want to ask yourself, what content am I going to need on my page in order to hit that conversion that we defined in the first step. So in the case of the freelancer profile page, I had to ask myself what information I need to put on that page in order to entice clients to reach out to a particular freelancer. Now, obviously you're going to have a lot of different ideas for things. For example, you might want to add a portfolio section or a testimonial section, but my recommendation is to really keep it as simple as possible. So the main conclusion that I came to was the very least that I am going to need in order to make it easy for clients to reach out to a freelancer is first of all a contact section and then also a bio section. Now keep in mind that over time your requirements might change. So obviously if you have a look at what the Unicorn Factory freelancer page looks like now, you can see that there is a portfolio section. There are things like availability, but those are things that were added over time after I started collecting feedback from clients who were using the bio section and the contact section to get in touch with freelancers. So once you have decided what information you're going to have for your particular feature, then what you want to do is you want to draw it all on a piece of paper. You want to use different websites as inspiration to kind of see what the layout of a particular page could be. And as soon as you have done all of that, it's time to move on to the next stage, which is to build the page out inside of Webflow. So the first thing that I recommend when building sites inside of Webflow is to start off with a static version of the page. So in the event of me building my freelancer profile pages, instead of immediately connecting it to the Webflow CMS and dynamically populating that content, I just started off by taking what I had drawn on paper and put it into static form inside of Webflow. The main reason why I do that is because it makes it a lot easier for me to understand, first of all, what fields are going to be dynamic, and more importantly, what field types are most appropriate in order to display dynamic content on there. So if you know how the Webflow CMS works, you'll know that there are a whole bunch of different field types. For example, the single text field, the image field, or single references and multi-references, and it will be a lot easier for you to decide which ones you should use after you have built a static version of that page, rather than trying to build out the database inside of the CMS first. So once you've gone through the process of building the static version of your page and you've made it mobile responsive, now it's time to use the Webflow CMS to dynamically map fields inside of the CMS to that static page that you have just created. So in the case of the freelancer page on the Unicorn Factory, I knew I needed an attachment field for my profile picture. I knew I needed a few single line text fields for the job title and the name of the freelancer. I also knew that I needed a rich text field for the bio section. So I just recommend going through all the different elements that you have built inside of Webflow, picking the appropriate field type, and then creating the field inside of the Webflow CMS. So once you've created your CMS collection, now it's time to add an actual record to your CMS so you can start mapping up the fields inside of the CMS to your template page. Now, one big thing that I want to recommend here is to use actual data rather than lorem ipsum in order to create that example record. Using lorem ipsum or sample records that you can create by clicking on the add 5 new items to an empty Webflow collection is definitely a lot more convenient, but it will make the process of actually building your site significantly harder. So I recommend finding an example record that is realistic and using that as your first record to map up the fields. So when I set up the Unicorn Factory, I actually used myself as the first example of a freelancer on there, and obviously I made sure that my bio was set up correctly. I made sure that I had the right kind of image, and what I realized was that I actually had to slightly change the layout of the image field in order for it to work across different screen types. So using real data will just make it a lot easier for you to spot what kind of little adjustments you're going to have to make in order for it to work over time, and using sample data or placeholder content just doesn't allow you to spot it that easily. So once you've set up your CMS collection and you've mapped all of the fields to the template page inside of Webflow, then you are ready to set up all of the other databases that you might be using in your project. So in my case, I use MemberStack to store member data, and I also use MailerLite to basically send emails out to different freelancers. So what I want to do is I want to create a duplicate version of the Webflow collection inside of MailerLite, inside of Airtable, and inside of MemberStack. Now, I highly recommend starting off with Airtable first, because Airtable is going to be the central data point that will control the flow of all of your information. Now, obviously, in certain instances, you're not going to need every single field type in all of the other databases like MemberStack or MailerSend, so definitely be a bit more selective there. But when you are working with Airtable, you definitely want to map up a version of every single field inside of Airtable so that later on, when you set up the workflows, you can connect those fields to each other. So going through that process is real simple. Just open up your Webflow collection in one screen and open Airtable up in the other screen, and then just make sure that when you are creating a new field inside of Airtable that you are using an appropriate field type. For example, if you are using an image field inside of Webflow, make sure that you use the attachment field for the image field inside of Airtable. And of course, there are a whole bunch of other field types that you can select inside of Airtable. So just have a little look through them and see which one you think is most appropriate. And so once you've gone through the process of setting up all of your other databases like MemberStack and MailerLite, and in some instances you might only need Airtable to get started, then you can start setting up workflows in tools like Zapier, Integromat, or whatever else you're using. Now, the fact that you've gone through the process and set up your collection inside of Webflow correctly, as well as created a mirror version of that inside of Airtable, will make mapping up the workflow quite a lot easier, because you'll be able to just select the field inside of Airtable that currently holds the information and then map those field types up with the Webflow version of that particular field, and that will make setting up your workflow an absolute breeze. So as I said at the beginning of this video, this step-by-step process can be used to build entire MVPs from scratch, but also add existing features to sites that you already have. So if you wanted to add something like the portfolio feature, you'd go through a very similar process, which is, first of all, you start off by mocking up what that particular feature could look like on the profile page. Then what you do is create a static version of that section inside of Webflow. Then you create the CMS field, and then you create the Airtable Airtable table that holds all of that information for the portfolio, and then you set up the workflow that sends that information from Airtable to Webflow. So I highly recommend using a process like this because it will make it a lot easier for you to maintain your site over time. It will make things a lot easier when it comes to adding new features, but more importantly, if you're just getting into the no-code space and you don't have a lot of experience in building products, using this process will just give you a step-by-step recipe in order to turn your idea into something that you can actually publish on the internet. So I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please be sure to like this video and also leave a comment in the comment section. It helps with the algorithm. It helps spread this video through the internet. Other than that, I want to thank you so much for sticking around for the entire video, and I'll see you back here for the next one.